Moving into a listener question time now. A question coming in from Mark. He is looking at some tight end premium advice. So we're looking at 1.5 PPR. Said he was going to hold off and try and wait and grab a tight end in the later rounds, but he's hoping maybe then to go for somebody like Pat Fairmouth or Dalton Schultz. But he said that he realizes, or he's seen that you have Albert Okwuegbunam rated very highly in your current rank. So he needs to kind of compare that with some of the startup ADP and see what he's going to try and do to get Albert O on his roster. I know we've been talking about Okwuegbunam for quite some time over the last probably 12 to 18 months. And we've talked about, being Noah Fant drafters and the excitement when you see what Albert O can do and how athletic he looks. You have mentioned that he's potentially, a top 10 tight end in the league. And now we have Noah Fant moved on to Seattle. We have him having pretty much the tight end share there with Russell Wilson himself. So he just said he hasn't heard enough about him to know why he's so high. So I kind of probably touched on that so far, but looking through the options, he's wondering, with the lack of wide receiver depth in the rounds 4 through 7, if you had any trade advice for this year, or if we can, mention on an upcoming podcast, which we're obviously doing right now at this point in time, what advice that we would be giving anyone drafting at this point of the year. So a couple of questions in there, Shawn, but Albert O is about to go into the stratosphere at the tight end position. But what are some of your thoughts to give Mark some feedback there?
Listeners of Stealing Bananas as well will know that I like to throw in at the end of some of the pods. So it's really just there for the listeners who stick out the full, 45 minutes, the full hour 10, as we sometimes go, that Albert O is going to be the tight end 1 in 2022. Now, that's probably a little bit optimistic, right? But there are a lot of positives here for him. Obviously, his ADP really jumped after the Noah Fant trade as part of that Russell Wilson package. But Colm, thankfully, that's one of the things that you and I were gambling on in an early draft that we did with Zach. Albert O, one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. And so when you're looking at these guys who, as physical specimens, are almost impossible to deal with because of their elite athleticism, you're looking at both of the guys who were with Denver originally, now Noah Fant obviously with Seattle. You're looking at Kyle Pitts, who blew up as a rookie, and especially at least from a yardage perspective, could have huge numbers in 2022. And then you're looking at Mike Gesicki, who is more of a big wide receiver, but obviously has been brought back there with the Dolphins, where they're going to have this attack that now features Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Gesicki. It's going to be very difficult to contend with all of those weapons. The interesting thing, obviously, will be who benefits the most and who maybe is a little bit more of a decoy. But the inability of defenses to take all of those guys away should boost the efficiency numbers for some of these players, open somebody up. There's the potential that Tyreek Hill doesn't drop as far as people think, but there's also that potential that it really unlocks Waddle and allows him to get some massively explosive plays with a little bit more well-rounded route tree. And then again, that possibility for Gesicki, where as the third option and with defenses having to contend with all that speed, that this could be the year where he takes the next step. So we're looking at these extremely athletic tight ends, but Albert O fits in there. In that early tight end tier article that I mentioned earlier in the show, I talk about him, why we'll be looking at him, and again, some great stuff here from the Stealing Signals tool. He ran almost 260 fewer routes than Fant, but he bested him in terms of yards per route, 1.99 in targets per route, 0.24. Again, those numbers come from the great Sports Info Solutions package. Both of those numbers would have put him in the low end tight end 1 range on a full workload, right? And so you're looking now, he's going to be the guy there. They're going to have extremely upgraded QB situation in Russell Wilson. Even if you're a little bit down on Wilson and think that the next 5 or 6 years for him will be not quite what we saw in Seattle, it's also going to be a huge difference from Teddy Bridgewater and Locke there. So that part of it, I think, really exciting. We talk about how, just from a viewer's perspective, I mean, you see Fant, and one of the things that he mentioned recently was interesting, that he sees himself as sort of a vertical tight end, which there aren't a lot of tight ends who are kind of branding themselves in that way, right? Where he's saying, I got to get deep. I've got the speed to get deep. He does. You look at Albert O, and he has all of that speed, and yet the hip flexibility there. And again, we don't do a lot of sort of scouting based analysis here on overtime, but there are some things that jump out just so clearly, and you can see how it manifests as the plays are going on that, it's just striking. The guys who are that big, it's just going to be a little bit different than your 190-pound wide receiver who can flip the hips and make those plays, get back upfield like it's nothing. But you have Albert O here doing the same thing at the tight end position. The stiffness of Fant, who again is somebody we like and are drafting a lot, versus the fluidity of Albert O. One of the reasons I think that he was the guy who stayed and Fant was the person who moved on in this trade. I wouldn't be surprised if Denver is just like, straight up, we think that he's better. He's obviously now in a better situation since he's going to have the vastly improved quarterback of the two. And so the possibility that he would be there and take this big leap. Now, there's still going to be some target competition there. They have Cortland Sutton. They have Jerry Jeudy. They signed Tim Patrick to the contract. We love KJ Hamler. We'll see if he comes back and if his apparent vertical ability is as good a fit with Russell Wilson as it seems like it might be. But those guys, I think, have the potential to cannibalize each other a little bit more than they do Okwuegbunam, as you mentioned. And from that perspective, I think that those guys have a little bit of risk where Albert O maybe has the upside. Again, you don't want to get to the point where you have such high exposure that if he gets hurt, all of your teams are sabotaged, but he is someone that we're looking at there.
Did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.